What truly makes someone a good person? Is it the ideas they ascribe to in their head? Is it the groups that they identify with outside of themselves? Or is it how they feel about themselves and what they project into reality? I'm Carrie Blazer, the Divine Feminine. My soul's name is Sophia, and today I'm here mainly to share my free ebook, link below, my 6 Divine Feminine self-love strategies, and encourage everyone to like and subscribe to my channel so I can help distribute that free ebook and help teach people free DIY trauma healing techniques so we can all learn to love ourselves more and project that out into the universe. Self-love creates heaven on earth is my perspective, but I'd really like you to do a deep dive on your own to see, how do you see it? Do we need to teach people what to think? Do we need to indoctrinate people with the correct ideas? Or do we need to teach people how to love themselves truly in their soul, so what's projected out of their hearts is love and not self-hate? Let's start with Melanie Phillips. She's an author, a commentator, and she does a great deep dive into the liberal mindset and how that all works. So let's start with her. Let me bring it up for us. Okay, here she is. I'll increase the size of my screen. Here we go.
The Western liberal mind conceives of itself as being good because it's liberal. The Western liberal tells him or herself, I'm a good person because I'm liberal. I'm liberal because I'm a good person, which means that I believe in things like the brotherhood of man, conscience and compassion, looking after the wretched of the world, the poor, the wretched of the world, standing up against abuses of power. These are all good things, and that's why I'm a liberal. And I'm a liberal because of all these good things. So one of the expressions of my goodness and my liberalism is that I support the Palestinian Arabs, who I think are an oppressed people, and they are oppressed by the Israelis, who have taken their land away from them, and they are oppressing them. Now, every part of that, in my view, is a lie. But put that to one side. This is what the liberal progressive thinks. And the liberal progressive thinks that supporting the Palestinians is therefore something that makes the liberal progressive a good person. October 7 happened, and suddenly you have a situation in which the people that the liberal progressive has supported as being oppressed, and everything they do is a legitimate defense or resistance against oppression, suddenly we can see that those people have turned into the most bloodthirsty savages that could ever be imagined. Not just people who kill, but who slaughter in a sadistic, barbaric, debauched and depraved fashion.
So I'm going to step in here because I have personal family connection to the October 7th event. My ex-husband is Israeli. My 3 grown children with him are also half Israeli. I have a niece that was at the music festival, and about 10 of her friends were killed right in front of her, and she had to go to 10 funerals in a week. So I'm going to discuss later how we all live in a holographic universe, how the heart is a vortex, supporting that we live in a holographic universe. And that's why the universe is a mirror showing us ourselves in every moment as a constant feedback loop for self-improvement. Why are so many women attracted to what's happening in Gaza? Why are so many women supporting Palestinians as the oppressed? Do women feel oppressed? And is how we feel a direct relation to reality? Or is it we're triggering childhood wounds? There's a lot to discuss there and a lot to unpack. But just think about what she's saying. And I'll leave you with a Carl Jung quote before we continue. He's my favorite. One does not become enlightened by imagining beings of light, but by making their darkness conscious. How are liberals making their darkness conscious? By supporting a terrorist organization who routinely engages in the killing of what we would, civilians. And can one group be simultaneously oppressed and also be the oppressor? And if that's true, is reality more complex than just oppressor, oppressee? Let's think about that, because that's an external locus of control. And in psychology, when you have an external locus of control, oppressor, oppressee, and that's your worldview, that sets you up for a victim mindset, codependent mindset, an unhealthy mindset that's not grounded in how reality is created. So let's keep going.
That people can't imagine ever happening. They have slaughtered, raped, beheaded, tortured, burned alive babies, children, women, elderly men, and others, and in which the people that they have supported as being oppressed are good people because they're victims are these savages. And the people they have represented as oppressors are the victims. They can't have that. Because if they have that, if they admit that that is the case, then their entire worldview is shattered, because the people, you know, the cause they have supported as representing goodness is shown to be evil. And what does that make them? It makes them evil. So they can't have it. So what do? They go to extraordinary lengths to pretend that black is white, that justice is injustice, that oppression is resistance, and vice versa. So they have to represent the Israelis as being at fault. The Israelis are to blame for what's happened.
Do you think that living in that black and white mindset represents an emotionally mature individual? Or is that person working from a childhood wound, putting him into fight or flight? We're here, we're here, we're here, we're here. Or is reality much more complex than that?
So there is no better way of blaming people than accusing them of the very thing they are the victim of. Projection. So you accuse them of genocide. We hear it also regularly. The Israelis are accused of being Nazis.
And just a little bit of facts. What is, modern warfare typically kills one military person for every 9 or 10 civilians. In Gaza, that ratio is one military person for every 2 or 3 Gazans. So in reality, if we look at comparatively what is, genocide in modern warfare, Gaza's not it. So why does that situation draw so much attention? Why does the whole world get up in arms over the Jews? Well, if we live in a holographic universe, why do the Jews attract so much hate, which is a mirror to their own hate? Did they kill their own Messiah 2,000 years ago? Was Jesus the Jewish Messiah and they just refused to identify him as such because he was pointing out all the money problems and the fraud, waste, and abuse in the temple? Could that be it? Was he not ready personally? Was Jesus practicing monogamy? Like, if we look at his death through the lens of the universe as a mirror, he was killed on a Friday. That's when Judaism honors the feminine. Mary Magdalene was there. There's now a gospel of Jesus' wife referring to Mary Magdalene. So why was it necessary for Jesus to be crucified in front of his wife on the Sabbath, when he would have been reading the Woman of Valor poem at home, to see and understand himself? In a second here, I'm going to share a quote from my book right under the 2 heroes in my book, and that's Justin Waller and Andrew Tate. Just saying. Projection in a mirror, and we're get that. And the quote I'm going to read you in a second is about Carl Jung and all about projection and how it works.
It's not simply an offensive thing. It's a very deliberate thing, because if the Israelis are Nazis, then we are free. We, the liberal West, are free of any kind of guilt or any kind of association with bad things, because they are to blame. They are the people who are bad. And so we are free to continue with our fantasies of us being good people. And I think that's also what lay behind these amazing scenes that we saw on social media of people with their hands, tearing down the posters of the hostages. Now you have to ask yourself, what's going through the mind of someone like that? These weren't posters advertising Israel. They weren't advertising the Israeli Defense Forces. They were pictures of babies, of children, of women who had been kidnapped by bloodthirsty monsters, by savage, depraved savages, and were being almost certainly subjected to untold horrors. And yet they were torn down, and the faces of the people tearing them down were contorted very often with rage and hate. And you have to ask yourself, what's going on in the mind of that person? And it seemed to me that they had to literally with their fingernails tear it out of sight. It was something that could not be tolerated to be in existence at all. The very concept of the Israeli babies and children as victims of the people they had been supporting, because it contradicted the narrative on which they had hung their own moral worth. And it seemed to me also they were tearing the Jews out.
When we hang our worth on an external narrative, it shows our own lack of worth. Like, I don't hang my worth on any kind of external narrative. I understand how that my soul houses all the wisdom and knowledge in the universe. That's how I'm made in the image of God. I'm made in the image of the quantum field that houses all the wisdom and knowledge in the universe. But when I need an external group to show me my value, which the climate movement, a lot of left-wing movements are about identifying with a group as opposed to identifying with yourself. That the group think is more important than the individual. Well, that's a Christian worldview. Fear God, be subservient to God, then you're going to get to heaven, right? And heaven's someplace else. Well, utopia for these groups is someplace else. It's not here. But how can heaven be located elsewhere when we live in a holographic universe? We're going to get into the science behind that in a minute.
Trying to tear the Jewish people completely out of their world, out of their sight, out of their world, out of their minds, out of their thoughts, and out of their consciences. That's to me what it represented. And this whole inversion of genocide thing is part of that. It is not just disgusting. It is not just ridiculous. It's evil. And I think it is a symptom of the evil paths into which the West has fallen through its embrace of a whole range of ideologies, a whole range of thinking, which I think has come to define what we call the liberal progressive West.
So let's talk about that. Where does evil come from? And how do we stop evil? Do we stop evil by canceling it outside of ourselves? Or do we stop evil by not projecting it from our hearts and from self-hate? That's an interesting question. Well, Dr. Andrew Huberman, a famous neuroscientist, is going to start answering that question for us before we do a deep dive and get to that Carl Jung quote about projection, because this really helps us understand where we're going awry in terms of where we're focusing our attention and how we can truly create a more civilized society for us all.
What we need to do is start to figure out how we can, I think, especially for the next generation of kids, how to teach them to regulate their nervous system so that they recognize that pulse of adrenaline as placing them in a compromised position. Like, we have to leverage the idea that being able to hear and listen hinges on the ability to be calm. So therefore, the ability to be calm is crucial to hearing and listening is crucial to our advancement as individuals and as groups. The problem is everyone's been trying to do this backwards. They've said we all have to get along. We have to cancel culture. We all have to, listen to one another. And I think, again, we have to start from the inside. We have to teach it physiologically. Now, I don't have a master plan on how to do that, but one of the reasons I'm here and one of the reasons I'm, teaching neuroscience on Instagram and not just in my laboratory is until we can learn to regulate the self, I don't think we're going to get where we want to go as a culture. But we need to.
Well, I totally agree with him. Until we learn how to regulate the self, we're not going to get where we want to go as a culture, as a society, as a globe. Because life is a projection. We live in a holographic universe. And when we accept that we live in a holographic universe and what draws our attention, our perception, what we attract into our life is solely for us to see ourselves. I attracted Andrew Tate into my life well before I remembered that I was raped as a child and had forced abortions. Now, does that mean Andrew did it for sure? I don't know what that means. I don't know what his life actually entailed. All I can tell you is that he's the third hero in my book. I don't speak for Andrew and I don't speak for law enforcement, but this is how I see my life. And after Andrew, I attracted 2 decorated fire academy instructors into my life. All before it led me back to my guy from my childhood, who's currently the head of global security at GoDaddy, former FBI. So Andrew Tate was warm up for the fire department, then FBI, and then executives. And you can read into that all that you want. But let's get into Carl Jung's quote about projection and see how that works and see, if you're triggered by Andrew Tate, then that he's actually helping you see yourself and heal from your emotional wounds. Let's get into that. All right, here we go. Let me present. So my book, My Inner Heroine, Exploring Feminine Pain, is my story of how I healed from my childhood trauma. I start 10 years ago, but I quickly go to 7 years ago when I attempted suicide. And so this book is about how I attempted suicide, how I healed, and how I started attracting 6 different men into my life to mirror my wounds back to me. The universe is a mirror showing me myself in every moment as a constant feedback loop for self-improvement. And so these men mirrored my problems back to me so I could see, oh, I got improvement. Oh, I got improvement. Oh, I got improvement. Oh, I got improvement. And so Justin and Andrew are my second and third heroes. And what's interesting is I noticed that I have 6 heroes and I have 7 chakras. The crown, which is like the first opening, which the first guy, Tim, in the book, that was 2.5 years, huge opening. Then I had to use my intuition, my third eye, there's Justin Waller, to be brave enough to reach out to Justin Waller, who's 16 years younger than me. Like, why would he want me? Then the third is Andrew Tate, my throat chakra, my communication. And before I accepted all the signs and synchronicities that I am the divine feminine reincarnation of Mary Magdalene, in 2023, Andrew came through to me really strong one time and told me that my voice is louder than his and showed me this visual that he's got my back. So it was all these TV screens and we just kept turning in a circle showing me I'm going to be on all these screens. Now he's got my back. And we all know Andrew Tate can talk. He's my throat chakra. And then the 2 Fire Academy instructors are my solar plexus and my sacral, leading back to my root, JC, Jason Colvin, from my childhood. And let's read the quote from Carl Jung. If you imagine someone who is brave enough to withdraw all of his projections, then you might get an individual who is conscious of a pretty thick shadow, subconscious. Such a man has saddled himself with new problems and conflicts. He has become a serious problem to himself, as he is now unable to say, they do this or that. They are wrong and they must be fought against. Such a man knows that whatever is wrong with the world is in himself. If he only learns to deal with his own shadow, he has done something real for the world. He has succeeded in shouldering at least an infinitesimal part of the gigantic unsolved social problems of our day. We're souls having a human experience. This is why love thy enemy, that we have no enemies. We all as souls, we all come here to mirror each other back to each other. So for self-improvement opportunities, like our souls plan our lives based on our wounds for self-improvement opportunities. That's number 3 in my book, Learning to Surf the Waves of Life. And the same teaching is life is like jumping on a trampoline. The deeper you go, the higher you fly. You have to explore your depths before you can explore your heights. That's all based on the laws of physics. If you want to gain the momentum, propulsion, the kinetic energy necessary to climb like Mount Everest, you got to surrender to the dive first. And that's where you pull out more self-confidence, more self-belief, the whole preparation process. And then you're ready with, all this preparation to catapult yourself up Mount Everest. And what I had to learn, I've been to the Mount Everest base camp. that if I want Mount Everest-sized wisdom, I had to take on Mount Everest-sized wounds, and I certainly did. All right, but let's talk for a second how that works, how the universe is a mirror, all based on the laws of physics, and the map of consciousness. So the map of consciousness shows us here on the left that this is our soul, and our souls communicate via our emotions, and they come out our hearts. So our emotions vibrate at different frequencies. And these lower vibrating emotions like shame, grief, and fear all vibrate below 100 hertz. Would you like to know what also vibrates below 100 hertz? Cancer, viruses, and bacteria, because our bodies are a mirror of our soul as well. And our cells have receptors on them to receive our own energy. And we'll see in a minute when I show you the video about how our heart is a vortex, how all that works. But when we learn to surf the waves of life and not I used to live in my shame, guilt, and fear. I had 35 years of debilitating lower back pain. That my sacral chakra was screaming at me to heal from my rape and forced abortion wounds. And it was gnarly for me. Like 35 years. It only healed about 6 years ago after I attempted suicide. But once I started spending a lot more time in courage, love, and enlightenment, first time I experienced enlightenment was 2024, 2 years ago. Then I stopped getting sick. Like, I haven't been sick in 6 years. I didn't get the COVID vaccine. I went to hot yoga the whole time. I never got COVID because I didn't fear it. I don't live in my fear, guilt, and shame, so I don't need to attract fearful, guilt-ridden, shameful experiences into my life anymore because that's not where I live. That's not me anymore. So the universe doesn't need to show me that through my external experiences, which is why I attracted so many players into my life. I had a wound that I'm replaceable. I only found that with the second Fire Academy instructor. And once I saw that, I was like, that's why I attracted so many players, because I had a belief that I'm replaceable. I internalized that. That's not true. No one's replaceable. Well, let's talk a second about how the universe is a mirror in terms of laws of physics. We live in a holographic universe. How does that operate? As we're learning to operate our souls. So when part of my soul vibrates at, let's say, 40 hertz, which is shame, right? So 40 hertz, and that moves a little, then all the souls around me who also have 40 hertz will move as well. And that's how I see myself. Wisdom says the universe is a mirror, showing me myself in every moment as a constant feedback loop for self-improvement. Knowledge says we attract what we are through energetic resonance, meaning a vibrational match. So we're going to see in this experiment in a second that when a tuning fork is tuned to 512 hertz and a tuning fork is tuned to 440 hertz, when the 512 hertz moves, 440 doesn't even notice, not in the same reality, doesn't even notice that energy is moving. But when both are tuned to 440, when the 440 moves, so does the other 440. And that's what draws our perception, our attention, what creates our own reality. People say we all live in our own reality. This is what I'm talking about. So if someone's constantly perceiving evil outside of themselves, that is their soul showing them the evil inside of themselves, because we live in a holographic universe. And Christians taught that heaven is elsewhere, evil is here. So are the Christians evil or the Christians heaven? I'll leave you with that question. You can clearly see the difference between the two. Okay, let me stop sharing. And I'm going to bring up in a second how the heart is a vortex, but let me go over how all this works. So we all have energy bodies or souls, and our souls communicate out through our hearts, heart and soul. And the nervous system in our hearts is far more complex than our brains. And our hearts send far more signals to our brains than the other way around. So if in my soul I feel fear, and that's what's communicated out through my heart and up to my brain, that my brain is continuously releasing cortisol. Well, what happens to our body when we have an overabundance, an extended period of cortisol, where our blood retains really high sugar levels to prepare us for fight or flight? And what those high sugar levels do over time is increase inflammation. Well, how many diseases are a cause of inflammation? A lot. Well, the field of epigenetics, epi meaning before genetics, has proven that less than 1% of our diseases come from our genetics. They come from our soul. And I can show you a video in a second. You know what? Let me pull that up from Dr. Bruce Lipton, Epigenetics, because he's awesome. Let me pull this up and show you and how this works. He has a really great example of how this all works. I think you'll appreciate this. Here we go.
Whatever picture you hold in your mind, the brain releases complementary chemistry that matches that picture, and it releases it into the body. And the chemistry of the blood is what controls the genes and the behavior. Children, when adopted into a family where there's cancer running in that family, the adopted child will get the same family cancer. But the point, the adopted child has totally different genetics. What was the point? It was being adopted into a family where the programming of that child is what caused the cancer. It's consciousness who releases the chemistry to the environment that controls the genes. And you can change your consciousness, and you can change your environment. And all of a sudden I say, oh my God, we were programmed to be victims. It turns out we are masters of our genetic activity. And this is the new science called epigenetics. Whatever picture.
So we are masters of our genetic activity. It wasn't incredible that the adopted kids got the same cancer as the adopted family members and not the kind of cancer that was in their genes. That's how powerful our souls are. That's how much our souls are in charge. We live in a holographic universe. So let's learn how the heart actually functions. It's not a pump, because that's based on the laws of physics. Possible. And we're going to learn why that's true. And then we're going to get into how the heart actually forms in the embryo. And we're going to lean on an Einstein quote and a Tesla quote. Einstein said, the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. And this is how blood can flow before the heart is formed, which we're going to see in both videos. And then Tesla, who said, if you want to understand the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Which, okay, how does blood flow without a heart, right? To pump it. Fascinating. I love those quotes. Okay, here's our first one.
Let me just read this because I think it's actually probably one of the best descriptions of the heart that I've ever run across. They taught you the heart was just a glorified meat pump, that it squeezes and pushes blood like some crude mechanical device, a hydraulic engine made of flesh. That is what they want you to believe, because if you buy into that primitive lie, you never ask deeper questions. But it is false. It has always been false, and the real science proves it. Dr. Francesco Torrenguas, a Spanish cardiac researcher, discovered what the textbooks refuse to acknowledge, that the heart is not a pump. He dissected thousands of hearts and found that the heart is a single continuous muscle band folded into a spiral. He proved that the heart works like a vortex generator, creating suction and torque, not pressure. He called it the helical ventricular myocardial band, and it changes everything. The real movement of the blood comes from pressure differentials, electromagnetic flow, and coherent resonance. The blood spirals naturally. It need not be forced through miles of arteries and capillaries. The so-called pump is not strong enough to push thick fluid through 60,000 miles of tubing. That is basic physics. That lie was dead on arrival. Here is the truth. Blood moves before the heart forms in the embryo. That is, by the way, a documented fact. It flows via frequency, resonance, and electric charge. The body is a field, not a factory. Your heart creates a toroidal electromagnetic field that radiates 6 meters from the body. This field syncs with the earth, the sun, and every living being around you. It is a resonator, a tuner, a conductor. It aligns the rhythm of your cells. It feels, it remembers, it emits, and it responds to emotion, thought, light, sound, and breath. When you feel love, grief, fear, or peace, your heart transmits it. It is the central frequency modulator of your biology, not a pump. And the institutions know this. The Heart Math Institute has measured these fields for decades. They know the heart has more neuronal cells than parts of the brain. They know it is a second brain. They know coherence in the heart transforms the entire nervous system. So why are they still teaching children a 400-year-old guess from William Harvey that has never been updated?
That is an excellent question. Why are they teaching us repeatedly this external locus of control? The heart comes in that the inside makes the outside makes the inside work, not the inside makes the outside work, which is true in multiple places. Like, do people function properly? Are they mentally healthy when they don't take care of their inside? No. When we do not have a secure attachment to self, an anxious attachment style or an avoidant attachment style, then that's where we bring problems into our personal lives, into our relationships, and into our work life, into every part of our life, because that is the self-hate. When I have hate in my heart will project that externally and mirror it back to me through a process called energetic resonance, through the vortex. But it's the Christian worldview. So when I talk about worldview, right, we talked about that with Melanie Phillips about the liberal mindset. That's a worldview. Well, there's oppressors and oppressees. So there's only two. You're either here or you're here. And I don't want to be an oppressor, so I got to oppressee, and I got to align with them. It's a very simplistic worldview. As if somewhat, it's that black and white, the childish worldview. And it doesn't align with the fact that we live in a holographic universe. The heart is a vortex, like a black hole. You can't command a black hole. It's physiologically impossible. Based on the laws of physics, you can't command a black hole. Energy gets put in, the energy spits it out, and then we see at the rim, the universe is a hologram. But let's get into the second video about how hearts are formed. I just love this one. It's my favorite one. Before the heart beats for the first time, something far greater begins to move. Long before your heart ever beat, thousands of cardiac cells made a silent decision. There was no pulse, no rhythm, no sound. In the earliest stages of development, individual heart cells begin firing electrical signals on their own. Then something remarkable happens. They synchronize. Separate impulses align into one coordinated electrical wave. That wave triggers the first contraction, the first heartbeat, the beginning of a rhythm that can last a lifetime. So I'm going to leave you there. I hope you grabbed a copy of my 6 Divine Feminine Self-Love Strategies, my free ebook below. There's a link to my book on Amazon if you want to check it out. Please check out my other videos, all my DIY trauma healing techniques, all the free DIY trauma healing techniques, because the mental health crisis is going to be resolved at home like I did it, and not in a therapist's office. Because therapy only engages half of the nervous system, the communication. It doesn't engage the action. And to create heart coherence, we need both. So as a man, I recommend chopping wood and then yelling your problems while you chop wood. That's the most testosterone producing, cortisol reducing activity for you. Women, walking or gentle yoga, and find a way to communicate. There's a lot of ways you can do it for free at home. All right, take care.